Bills a bit banged up at a key position as they get ready to take on the Colts here. We are halfway through the season. The team must push forward. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone, everybody, and possibly some help arriving for the Bills at another position.
Speaking of help arriving, I am back for the first time in a couple of weeks. You needed my help.
I always need your help, Andy.
Andy Young here with you, back in the saddle. Glad to be back.
You should have seen some of my spelling mistakes and whatnot for the description of the podcast over the last few weeks.
Hey, it's okay.
Welcome back.
We all do what we can.
Yeah. But Andy, you're back. Bills back to work, albeit a walkthrough to kick off the week, which kind of takes you a little bit by surprise. But when you look at how banged up the team actually is and, you know, players fighting through injury and players limited, players back to full practice, blah, 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 it's probably a good idea. Now, the big thing going on is Keon Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
Wrist injuries galore over at One Bills Drive, and just add another one to the list. And Sean McDermott confused me while talking about Keon Coleman.
Yeah, a little bit of a mixed message in what Sean McDermott had to say about the prognosis for Keon Coleman, saying in one breath that they haven't ruled him out for this coming game against the Colts, but at the same time, it could be an injury that lasts more than just this week. So I think he was directly answering questions as to, have you ruled him out this week? No, we haven't ruled him out this week. But could he miss more than 1 week of practice? He could. I don't think they know yet. They said it's still under evaluation at this point, which tends to make you think it's a good sign that he hasn't already gone under the knife for surgery,
right,
and they're just trying to sort of figure that out. But it is a little confusing as to what the status is. McDermott said that they'll know more about Keon Coleman on Friday, or at least be able to publicly give us more on Friday, whether he'll be able to play this week or not at the very least.
And Amari Cooper, wrist injury. He missed last game.
Right.
So you're looking at 2 wide receivers, 2 of the key wide receivers. Khalil Shakir, probably the top one.
But your 2 best outside receivers, no doubt.
Right. Both dealing with wrist injuries while you were not here, and Stevie Johnson, former Bills wide receiver, filled in for you. He did all right.
He's good.
I like Stevie.
He knows what he's talking about.
We got into wide receivers and wrist injuries, and he, at Wednesday of last week, said Amari Cooper is probably going to play if he's out there practicing in any form. They're just probably protecting the wrist. Ultimately, he did not play. I don't think Keon Coleman's playing if he's not practicing at all right now.
And we'll find out more tomorrow,
right,
which is Thursday
as the days go on. But, I mean, you go into a game against the Colts on the road, and you're down your top 2 outside wide receivers. As big as Mac Hollins came up towards the end of that Bills win against the Dolphins, you're not exactly comfortable with him. Emmanuel Sanders, who's been dealing with injury, and he's just been – I can't even say he's been hit or miss.
Emmanuel Sanders.
Did I say Emmanuel Sanders?
Curtis Samuel. Glad I'm back, guys. Case in point.
How did I arrive at that?
I don't know.
Emmanuel's.
You're getting old, dude.
At any rate, Curtis Samuelson. Curtis
Samuel.
I'm off the rails right now, Andy. I'll just read it. Yes. So.
We need a script for this podcast, apparently.
But you know what I'm saying.
Curtis Samuel, yes.
Andy, bail me out.
I'm trying. All right, Curtis Samuel obviously has done next to nothing this season.
Correct.
Who knows why that is? I still don't get it. Is he hurt? Has he been banged up? I mean, he is on the injured list throughout this season often. I mean, he dealt with the toe injury during training camp leading into the regular season, and now he's dealing with some other stuff limited in practice and has missed some time too. So maybe he's hurt and just hasn't really ever been able to get a foothold. I don't know.
It just seems like they don't have in place a plan for him.
I think they probably do. I mean, how could they not? They just like they bring in the guy who, you know, they're not paying him chump change, but you know, $8.5 million. It's not a ton, but it's not nothing. And he's a guy who's been a decent player in the league. He's never been a star, but
Right.
he's put up 800-yard seasons at his best season under the Bills' current offensive coordinator. How could you not come into this season with a plan? We talked to him a lot. And I don't want to make this all about Curtis Samuel or Emmanuel Sanders or Curtis Samuelson. But
is he a hockey player, Curtis Samuelson?
Matthias, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's strange to me. But in any case, they could get something more out of him. But if you're down both Cooper and Keon Coleman, that's problematic because then you're looking at Jalen Virgil, and maybe you're bringing up Tyrell Shavers again from the practice squad, relying on Mac Hollins, and, of course, you have Shakir over the middle, who I think is kind of the key to all of it in that group. But when you lose that amount of people on the outside, I mean, then teams can key in on Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid and make life tough. So hopefully one or both. I wouldn't expect Keon back just from the outset, just the way it's gone. I could be surprised. There's no inside intel on that. It's just, a guess. Cooper, if he practices in some limited fashion on Thursday, I think he'll have a much better shot to be back. And Sean McDermott said he was asked about Cooper and learning the offense and how he's performed, and he was like, he's had a very limited sample size. He had that one game, and then he was out.
Yeah, it'll be something if they're both out against the Colts coming up. You look at this Colts. Now I'm questioning in my mind everything I'm talking about. I'm like, is it the Colts they're playing this week? Yeah, it is. Colts not good against the pass, but also not good against the run. This could be a game where the Bills could lean heavily on the run against Indianapolis and still be able to do what they need to do, even if they're short those two wide receivers going into this. I think as far as 149 yards per game is what teams are putting up against the Colts right now. And the Colts defense, I think, stat-wise, if you look at just go off of numbers, they're like on par with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who the Bills were able to do whatever they wanted to against.
Yeah, their defense has not been great this year. I think they're giving up what it looks like 21 points a game. That's actually pretty good, but yardage-wise, they're giving up some stuff.
So they're doing kind of what we see with the Bills every now and then, this bend but don't break, teams putting up numbers but aren't getting into the end zone is kind of the Colts' MO in keeping games close, and that's been, for the most part, the Bills' MO, aside from maybe 2 or 3 games this year where they were able to run away with the game.
Yeah, it's just a sort of a weird team in that they have some players, but they just can't seem to put it all together.
Yeah.
Was their quarterback part of the situation there, and Anthony Richardson? They bench him.
That Anthony Richardson thing just blows my mind.
Yeah, they bench him, and then they bring in Flacco, who, all right, we're going to stabilize this and make a push for the playoffs. And their offense was much worse and put up their worst outing of the season last week with Flacco there. So who knows what kind of a team you're going to get. Defensively, they're a little bit up and down, and they keep things close. They've got some players on that team, but they're not an upper echelon. They're just, to me, a middle-of-the-road, middle-of-the-pack team, which is exactly what their record says they are.
And when you think of the Colts as a Bills fan and you think of Jonathan Taylor, you do get nightmares from looking at what he was able to do to the Bills a few years back during that regular season beatdown.
Tore him up.
In Orchard Park. Now, he's only had 3 games over 100 yards rushing this year. But again, it's Jonathan Taylor.
He's still dangerous.
If his A game shows up to play on Sunday, the Bills are going to have trouble with it.
So the interesting part about the Bills, and this has kind of been the MO, we've talked about this for years. Every single year we're asking, why are they not better against the run?
Mm-hmm.
Part of that, to me, is the Bills' strategy. They invite teams to run the football on them. They're okay with giving up some big chunks in the running game, so long as you're not beating them over the top. That, yeah, you're going to get some 15-yarders, but we're also going to get you some tackles for loss. And through the course of the game, you're not going to be able to maintain that. You're going to get impatient. You're not going to just keep running the football against us. Some of the better teams in the league running the football do, and that becomes problematic when Baltimore does it, when the Colts did it a few years ago with Jonathan Taylor. Miami was doing it last week and still at times got away from it a little bit. So that's kind of all their strategy. Like, they're okay with giving up big yardage in the running game so long as they're not allowing points. That's kind of their bend but don't break thing. They invite that, and they don't think that throughout the course of a game your offense is going to outscore theirs. So you're going to be forced into some inadvantageous situations.
You let the Dolphins get to 27 points in that, and they were basically looking at second and short, the Dolphins, because of the run game.
Right.
Almost the entire game from start to finish.
Well, McDermott mentioned that he was asked about third downs, he was asked about running game, and he said, look, some of the problems with pass rush and third down situations is that, especially against the Dolphins, we weren't forcing them into third and longs, there's debate about whether the Bills give up a ton of third and longs, which it seems they do more than any other team.
It does seem that way to me.
But in any case, he was like, on first down, we're getting beat. So then it's 2nd and 3. Or someone just runs for a first down on first down.
Right.
That's problematic. So they've got to shore that up. And I think some of the moves they made might help that a little bit. We'll see, just because of injuries. We'll get to that, I think.
Yeah, I'm going into that next. So defensive tackle is one of those banged up areas for the Bills. So a couple of familiar faces now back with the team. Maybe a little help there. I mean, you got to see how this plays out. You know, when I heard that Jordan Phillips and Quinton Jefferson, both with the Bills already, both return on one-year deals right now to maybe play a role at that defensive tackle position and help the Bills right now. But I believe, as Sean McDermott pointed out, and this is the way you think, both players just got released. Both players hadn't really been playing that much.
Obviously, if they were stars, they're not being released.
Right.
But the Bills do have an issue with depth on the defensive line. DeJuan Smoot on injured reserve with a wrist injury. Dwayne Carter out with surgery with a wrist injury. Another wrist injury.
Everyone's getting wrist injuries.
Right? Got to work on these wrists. Come on.
I'm not going to comment.
All right. Anyways, they need some depth there. They need some help. They need some warm bodies. And these are guys who are both familiar with the system. Jordan Phillips is having his third stint with the Bills.
Right.
He's kind of a fan favorite. Obviously, he gets the crowd really pumped up. He had a big sack season a few years ago with the Bills. He's sort of played his best football when he's played with Buffalo and bounced around with other teams in the interim. Quinton Jefferson spent a season here and was okay. It was nothing great. But just the depth behind Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones and Elianku, who's been up and down from the practice squad, has been okay too and done a nice job in spots. But they just need that depth, not knowing when Smoot, who plays defensive end and defensive tackle at times, is going to be back, and Dwayne Carter, who as a rookie was really coming on, you know, in that Houston sort of area in those games, and then they lose him to a broken wrist. So that's problematic, and these are guys that can come in right away. They know the system. They're very familiar, you know, a few tweaks here and there, but they understand the terminology and can go out and play.
Oh, and Jordan Phillips, when we talked to him, seemed thrilled beyond belief to be back here. Buffalo Bill, you know, a place where he would wear a winter coat out when it got cold out under his uniform.
Under his practice jersey and under his pads, he would wear a big parka during practice.
Right. Everyone knows that. You've seen pictures of him.
Yeah, and I mean,
but he said even down in Dallas, he was hinted towards he was still playing like he was on the Bills and didn't acclimate to being on the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, clearly he didn't like what was happening in Dallas. He was actually put on injured reserve and didn't think he needed to be. He thought he could still be playing through whatever injury he was dealing with. Said he's feeling good right now and can get out there and play. He referred to the Bills bringing him back as, I'm an acquired taste, and they like my taste. Right? Because he's a different cat, man. Like, he's big energy, gets the crowd fired up. Is he definitely a big run stopper? Not typically. he's been more of a 3 technique throughout his career, but he's that big body, big frame that can do some work in there. Is he going to come in here and be, Vita Vea like we saw the other day or whatever with the Buccaneers? I doubt it. But he can come in and give them some reps and stabilize things a little bit, at least in the interim while they work to get some of their guys back healthy.
Do you see both of these guys in the mix right away because of their familiarity with this defense?
I mean, I think so. It depends on what they want to do with Ilianku. They only have so many practice squad elevations that they can make without having to sign him to the 53-man roster. So I would guess at least one of them comes in and plays right away, depending on health and acclimation to the system. But I would guess they need defensive tackle depth and help, right? Yeah. They can't go into a game with only 2 or 3 defensive tackles. You need 4 in all likelihood, sometimes 5. So there you go.
And you get that. You have Jonathan Taylor, and you have Joe Flacco at quarterback, and you have a bunch of pass catchers on the Colts that aren't really putting up huge numbers as well. The guys that you would think, like Michael Pittman, I think he's dealing with an injury. He hasn't been the regular Michael Pittman. Mo Alley Cox, not that much action. I remember his name from the games against the Bills. He's not a guy who, you see every week is a monster or anything, but I remember him being effective against the Bills. And by the way, Christian Benford,
that's huge,
was actually practiced in full. Was he dealing with a wrist injury too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing after another with these guys. So Benford being back, certainly big because he's been fantastic. He has been one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL this season. That's not hyperbole. You look at the grades, you look at pass rating against, you look at all these metrics.
Name.
Nobody throws his way, and when they do, he's making a play.
Right.
So having Christian Benford back, whether you're playing a great passing attack or not, is always a good thing. Kaiir Elam did pretty well in that last game in spot duty. And I think that's important to have that depth in that spot.
Oh, yeah.
In Kaiir Elam. But having Christian Benford back to pair with Douglas is huge.
Yeah, and good to see that this injury was kind of a briefer injury than – and again, we'll know more about Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman and everyone else dealing with a wrist injury as the week goes on. But you're right. It's big to have him back. I thought Kaiir Elam, for the most part, did okay. I think there was a big play for the Dolphins that Elam got burnt on by, I'm horrible, Tyreek Hill.
That happens.
But I think for the most part, he was on Jalen Waddle most of the game from what I saw, and Waddle had like 1 catch.
A touchdown, but, what are you going to do, right?
Right.
Tua scrambles around and makes a play. Yeah, I mean, Elam was fine in that game to me. I didn't go back and watch the entire film of it, but just from watching the game on TV at home, it was serviceable, and they held the receivers of the Dolphins in check for the most part. They had their moments, and Tua got the ball out very quick, and Achane did a lot of damage through the air and on the ground, and some of the other guys got involved as well. But for the most part, they did a good job in limiting the big plays, which is exactly what you got to do against the Dolphins.
So what about the Colts now? It doesn't look like they're going for big play. I think this is going to be heavy Jonathan Taylor offense. Joe Flacco hasn't found that lightning in a bottle he found last year when he came in for the Browns.
Yeah, I like Pittman and I like Downs, but they're not superstars.
Right.
I haven't heard much about Adonai Mitchell, who was many thought going to be a Bills receiver coming out of the draft out of Texas. He hasn't had a big year. So, I mean, seems like it's going to be a Jonathan Taylor game, which should be a recipe for success for them every week. That's what they should try to do. You've got a good offensive line. I believe I saw that their center, Ryan Kelly, is going to be out for this game, and I think heading to IR, so that's big because they have a good offensive line. Quinton Nelson is just a mauler of a guard. So, I mean, to me, yeah, you got to shore up that run defense against a team that's going to want to run the football.
To me, looking at their losses so far, Andy, I mean, they hung in there with the Houston Texans both of their games. That's out of the way. Last week against the Vikings, they hung in there.
Packers without Jordan Love.
Yeah. Bears, they won 21-16.
Yeah, beat the Steelers.
They beat the Steelers, who the Steelers still blow my mind, but we'll get into that a little bit later on.
Yuck.
On how they're just hanging around. They're third in the AFC. Right behind the Bills. So
yeah, they keep everything close. I think the Bills are a vastly superior team, especially because they have Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know. If they're able to run the football against the Bills and keep things tight and their defense is half a decent, we could have a game.
Game indoors, too. So we heard this a lot with the new stadium. Bills should have a dome out here for Josh Allen. He'd play better in the dome. The offense is suited for a dome. It's interesting. It's like when they were down in Houston taking on the Texans, that roof was closed. They didn't look that great. So
no. I don't know that has anything to do with it, but I don't enjoy games in domes that much.
I hate it.
As a press box guy and watching the games, just feels sterile to me. But I'm sure it's better for the fans. And it's probably better for offenses generally. Like, look at Detroit. They're tearing it up. Look at the Colts all those years under Manning.
Yeah, but, I mean, Detroit's played inside forever.
I know. I'm just saying it. It helps when you have the players.
I can't stand, like, watching a game in a dome on TV, even though the shot is just of the field, but you know it's in a dome, just annoys me.
You're old school.
I want natural grass.
Outdoors.
Outdoors.
Or at least a retractable roof.
Or at least what the Bills are doing. You want to cover up the fans, cover up the fans.
Right.
But, this isn't baseball. Let's take a look at the game here, Andy.
Isn't that what we've been doing?
Bet MGM -4. You're supposed to be here helping me out right now.
I have already helped you, Curtis. Emmanuel
Sanders. He played for the Bills, right?
Indeed. I like the Bills to cover that. 4?
Yeah.
I think they win by a touchdown. Even if it could even be more than a touchdown, but I don't expect this to be like a field goal game. I think the Bills are the better team.
I do. I think this is a field goal game.
Okay.
I think the Colts just have a way of hanging around in games, just looking at what they've done so far. I think the Bills win by a field goal, and this one is close at the end.
Is this a Tyler Bass game winner again?
No, this is the Colts offense.
So the Bills
can't do anything. The Bills are up 3, and the Colts offense either miss a field goal at the end or just can't get into field goal range.
Or they're up 10 and they let a late touchdown or something. Okay.
Something like that.
All right. Fair enough.
Over under 47. Taking the under is always boring, but like this has the makings to me of a game that's like 20-17 is the final.
What was it? 47?
47.
I mean, even if the Bills put up 30 and they put up 17, that's a push. I'm going to say under.
Yeah, got to take the under in this one. So we got the final there, Andy. We'll start to wrap it up with a little 3 and out. I brought up the Steelers earlier. NFL trade deadline came and went. Not much happened, but I know Mike Williams didn't really do much with the Jets, but the Steelers getting him and Preston Smith, as far as like trade deadline stuff went earlier in the week, because we know the Bills, what did they release Mike Edwards.
And they signed those guys after the deadline.
Yeah.
They didn't do much.
So
Cooper was their swing a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, I was getting my oil changed. It was like, oh, it's a big trade deadline day. And I was like, I don't see the Bills doing anything, and it's election day.
Yeah.
I also don't think anyone's paying attention to it with the presidential election going on the same day.
Bean was busy watching CNN. He couldn't pick up the phone.
Right. Well, it was 74 degrees out here.
Right.
Maybe he was out golfing.
Yeah. I mean, the Steelers are an interesting team because they just play that Tomlin ball, dude, and they're always hanging around. Are they great? They haven't been in like a decade or more.
Mm-hmm.
But they have Russell Wilson to maybe throw some moonshots to George Pickens and to Mike Williams now, and you run Harris and Warren, and you kind of try to batter teams and get get TJ Watt after guys. I mean, they'll be in the mix just because they play that style of football that not a lot of teams play.
Such an afterthought to me at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
But now as the season goes on, it's like, okay, this could be a legit team. I mean, with what Russ Wilson did in Denver, you just thought he was kind of washed up.
I still don't think he's great, but it's better than what they've had the last few years between Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges and
Duck Hodges.
Right? Remember the
Nice
people were
pull.
saying that Duck Hodges was better than Josh Allen a few years ago? Yeah. I mean, and, their draft pick from a couple of years ago from Pitt. I mean, just not a lot of great players. So, I mean, anything out of Russell Wilson that's even average is an advantage for them from what they've had.
Absolutely. Every sport, Andy, well, baseball's done. Did you watch any of the World Series?
I did, because I was kind of hate watching the Yankees, and they had beaten my Guardians in the ALCS. And to watch Yankees fans, and I have many friends who are Yankees fans.
Yes.
We all do.
Yep.
To watch them get their hopes up in that deciding game, and they're like, oh my gosh, they're going to pull off this comeback, and then just to get rocked after that.
That was so fun.
I love it. It was great to have Ohtani win one. I mean, that's cool to have the best player in the game win a World Series. And the Dodgers are kind of the evil empire of the West at this point with the way they spend. But anytime the Yankees go down, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, so am I. So now it's NBA, NHL. What's your preference? What do you watch even when you're not working? Because we do cover the Sabres.
Right.
I had this conversation with a friend of ours who basically said, if I'm off, there's no way I'm watching a Sabres game.
Yeah.
Just not wasting my time. I, on the other hand, will go out of my way to watch Sabres
because
games.
you go cover them occasionally.
Well, and I love hockey. I play hockey still. Hockey was like neck and neck with football when I was younger on what I enjoyed playing more. Ultimately, football won out, but
you know where I stand on this. I grew up in Buffalo watching the Sabres, rooting for the Sabres, ended up covering them when I came and put my fan hat away, and you cover the team objectively. So I always keep an eye on the Sabres. Do I always, since I've taken this role as a Bills beat reporter, do I always watch every Sabres game? No, because I don't have to. I don't really go cover them right now, at least during this part of the season. So maybe more so towards the end of Bills season when I might be popping over there a little more.
yeah.
Watch out, blue and gold. I'll zone in a little more, but I always know what's going on, even if I don't watch every second.
Yeah.
Generally, what do I watch more? I'm a much bigger basketball fan. I love the NBA. I like college basketball. I would rather sit and watch a good NBA game than just a random hockey game.
See, that doesn't register in my head.
Dude, if the Sabres aren't playing and it's like Predators, Blackhawks, some random night, no way I'm watching that. But if it's like Kings, Nuggets, and it's on, sure. What's Jokic up to? Like, I'll be into that.
That's great. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. There's a good matchup at 10 o'clock that I can go home and watch on the NHL. Would rather do that way more than – and again, I was never a basketball guy as a kid. Like, it was soccer, hockey, lacrosse, football. Baseball, because you're a little kid. You play baseball.
But even growing up in the Boston area in the heyday of the Celtics, you're a teenager, right, when the Celtics are really good in the 80s?
My dad got playoff tickets, Celtics Pistons. Larry Bird's there. Kevin McHale, Danny Ainge, DJ, Dennis Johnson. I know all the guys.
Right.
Because it was huge.
Just wasn't your thing.
Later on that night, the Bruins were playing the Oilers in the Stanley Cup final. We had tickets to the Celtics Pistons. We wanted to stay and hide in the men's room and did not care we were at a huge Celtics win. Like, it was huge. everyone, and we were like, no, let's try and stay for the Bruins. And the Bruins got the crap kicked out of them later on that night by Wayne Gretzky and company. But that's just how I was. And I played on a hockey team that went 1-77. So it wasn't like we were good.
Yeah, I like a lot of people I grew up around played hockey, but I never played hockey. Always respected it. I used to fall asleep listening to the Sabres broadcast, listening to RJ on the radio when I was a kid on the Sabres radio network, but was never like, oh my God, it's my favorite sport, and never played it, which is a part of it too. I played basketball.
Right. I think that goes
big. I was a huge Jordan fan, so just a different time. Always was into basketball. All my buddies played basketball.
Still spend half your salary on Jordans. Shh. No, edit that part out, Jordan.
Christy, he's making stuff up again. That's my wife.
Before we go,
I didn't buy any more Jordans today.
Before we go, we do the what you watching thing. We've been doing it for a while. I bring this up because we had Bills fan, actor, comedian Nick Bakay on.
Some spicy comments from that guy.
One of our celebrities. He doesn't really like Andy Reid. I'll put it to you that way. But through talking to him and, diving into some of the work he's done, he has a show out now on Max called Bookie about the fact that all this online gambling is still not legal out in L.A. So Sebastian Maniscalco, a comic who's actually going to be in Buffalo, I think in a few weeks, plays the bookie in it. It is funny. It is disgusting at times. You will things happen that you're just shocked about, and then you laugh at. I highly recommend it.
Okay.
And I'm not just saying that because he was on here. And by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, the episode's there, so you can click on that too and check that out.
A plug from the K-Man. I love it.
But Bookie on Max, 9 episodes. He said that another 9 are coming out in December. It's really easy to get into. It starts quick, and it's a fun watch.
I am slowly, very slowly, and the last couple of weeks have been tough weeks for me. My father passed away, so haven't watched a whole lot of TV, but prior to that, I'm slowly making my way through the Vince McMahon documentary on Netflix.
That's not a shocker at all.
Right. People know I love wrestling, and a lot of the stuff that is brought out in that documentary is not groundbreaking to me. I know a lot of that stuff just because I'm deep in the wrestling lexicon, so to speak, but it's still cool to see and some of the stories and some of the people they brought out for that to give you a little twist on things that maybe you didn't know just as much about is really cool. I'm a few episodes into that, and I'll dive back into that as life kind of settles down here a little bit more for us.
I'd be interested in that because although I don't follow wrestling still, I like during the 80s.
Again, 80s, huge.
When it started with Hulk Hogan, Sergeant Slaughter.
Yep. Jimmy Snuka.
The Iron Sheik.
Who killed his fiancée.
The Iron Sheik did, or Jimmy Snuka?
Jimmy Snuka, his girlfriend.
All these guys. Andre the Giant.
Yep.
The first WrestleMania, which I'm sure they talk about in the documentary, that they wanted a Super Bowl of wrestling.
Yep. And Vince McMahon, speaking of Massachusetts, his job partly was, before he fully took over the WWF from his dad, was being a promoter at the Cape Cod Coliseum.
Really?
He kind of managed that area of the territory and promoted concerts and wrestling and different things on Cape Cod.
I did not know that.
Well, watch the documentary.
I will watch that documentary.
Yeah.
All right, Bills at Colts coming up on Sunday. Everyone's happy in our line of work because it's another 1 o'clock kickoff, and we're not going to be burning the midnight oil.
I will be there.
Andy will be out there. Andy's back. Post-game show with former Bills wide receiver Stevie Johnson will follow shortly after that 1 o'clock kickoff between the Bills and Colts.
Yeah, do us a favor. If you're watching this, listening to it, if you're on YouTube, you're on Facebook, or one of the platforms you can listen to us, do us a favor. Like, subscribe, share it, send us a comment. We really want that engagement, and we want you to give us some likes and see that stuff pop up in the algorithm, so to speak, right? And get this thing out there. So we have a lot of fun doing it, and we want more people like you who are watching and listening to enjoy it too.
Absolutely. I'm trying to, whatever. I was trying to click on, see how things were going. I missed a bunch of questions while you were gone.
Okay.
Because it was just me and Stevie, and I'm not computer savvy like you, so I was trying to see, but we'll deal with that on a later date. All right, Bills Colts Saturday, 1 o'clock for Andy Young. I'm Kevin Carroll. As always, thanks for joining us, everyone.